Hey, welcome to Crossroads, everyone. We're here reporting live from Turning Point America. It's the America Fest in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you so much for being here. We have some big stories today. Texas is clearing the way for mass arrests of illegal immigrants and also mass deportations. Guns could also soon get regulated through new controls on ammunition, and also universities could lose their federal cash. And we'll see how things go with that. I'll be talking about it. Now, first of all, Texas is now leading a new challenge to the federal government on its response to mass illegal immigration. This includes a plan to complete the construction of Trump's border wall, as well as a new policy that could allow the state to deport illegal immigrants while also charging them with state crimes, potentially. Now, the policy will likely run into some new legal challenges, but could also set a new standard for border security across the United States. Now, let me show you this first. This is the Texas governor, Greg Abbott. He's announcing the plan from 2 weeks ago. Watch.
Texas is having to step up and do even more to make sure that we deny illegal entry into the state of Texas. And as a result, Maria, in 2 weeks, I'll be signing a new law in the state of Texas that will make it illegal for people to enter the state of Texas from another country illegally, and authorizing every peace officer in the state of Texas to arrest those people entering our country illegally.
Now, look, it should be noted, we hear a lot of talk like this. We hear a lot of just noise, and they're suggesting they might do it. The Texas legislature has actually already approved the bill. This thing's already going through. This is the Houston Chronicle on November 15th talking about that side of it. It says that Republican state lawmakers signed off on a sweeping measure Tuesday night that will allow the state to remove people from the country, deport them, who are suspected of crossing the border illegally, a major escalation of Texas's border crackdown that will test the legal boundaries of state immigration enforcement powers. Now, I should note, when they say test the legal boundaries of state immigration enforcement powers, normally that's what you do with illegal aliens. You deport them, you charge them with crimes. It used to be a felony in some cases when they would enter the country more than one time illegally. That is normal law enforcement in the United States. If you break the law, they punish you for breaking the law, and that is normal. The issue you have with illegal immigration, though, is that normally it's the federal government doing it, because border security is one of the very, very few things that the federal government is in its history required to do in the United States, and they're not doing it. And so because the government has become delinquent on filling its basic roles, it's forcing the states to fill in that gap. Now, it says here further, it says the proposal now heads to the desk of Governor Greg Abbott, who had asked lawmakers to pass the measure as part of a special legislative session he called last week. And it says the bill passed on an 86-61 party line vote following several hours of debate that saw Republicans turn down 24 Democrat attempts to amend the bill. In other words, the Democrats and Republicans are voting in party line on this. In Texas, where they have a lot more Republicans than Democrats, it passed. Democrats tried changing the bill several times. They did not accept what the Democrats tried to do. Now, that said, Abbott is also pushing for a $1.54 billion spending bill, and some of that would also go into rebuilding the southern border wall. Now, how does this all work, you might ask? Well, let me show you some of the details on how this will actually play out. Let's say, for example, illegal aliens are entering the country, tens of thousands of them, millions of them. What does Texas do? Well, the Texas Tribune said this. It said, it is already illegal to enter the U.S. without permission under federal law, as we talked about. Without state law against illegal crossing, state law enforcement has been charging migrants with trespassing when they cross the Rio Grande into private property. In other words, as things currently stand right now, if an illegal alien, illegally enters the United States, they cross the Rio Grande, they step foot on the U.S., normally the federal government would have to deal with the, illegally entering the United States, level type crime. The federal government is not fulfilling that right now. They're not doing their job with that. And so the states have been trying to deal with the border crisis themselves. But because they cannot deal with that, crime that is a federal crime, and normally you'd have Border Patrol and ICE have to take care of that. They're not doing it. The states can only charge these illegal aliens with trespassing, because when they step foot on American soil, oftentimes they step foot on private property. Now, it says this bill would make it a state crime to cross the Texas-Mexico border between ports of entry. It says here that if a police officer has probable cause to believe a person crossed the Rio Grande, that person could be charged with a Class B misdemeanor, which carries a punishment of up to 6 months in jail. Now, it should be noted, probable cause essentially means that the officer has assessed that there is evidence of a crime. Probable cause means in this case that if these illegal aliens cross the Rio Grande, the officer, whether it's local law enforcement or National Guard, we'll have to see, if they believe the person crossed the Rio Grande, they can then charge them with this state crime, and it carries a punishment of up to 6 months in jail. If the person has been previously convicted of entering Texas illegally under this new bill, it says the charge could be increased to a second-degree felony, which carries a punishment of up to 20 years in prison. The bill allows a judge to drop the charges if a migrant agrees to return to Mexico, and it says if the migrant is convicted and has served their sentence, a judge would be required to issue an order for police to then transfer them to a port of entry, and they could face a felony charge for returning to the U.S. from Mexico. Now, on this, it should be noted a few things. This basically means that it's a slap on the wrist if they illegally enter the United States. If they are charged with it, it goes to court, the federal judge can say, okay, send them back, they take them to a port of entry, they drop them off. Now you could say that they could just go right around the bend and go and cross illegally again. But if they do that, if they re-enter the United States after being charged with breaking the law, they can now be charged with a felony crime, which has an actual prison sentence. And if they keep doing it, in other words, they're going to face federal crime after federal crime after federal crime, possibly. And so that will potentially limit the illegal re-entry, which is one of the big problems. Now, it says here that SB 4 prohibits police from arresting migrants in public or private schools, churches, and other places of worship, healthcare facilities, and facilities that provide forensic medical examinations to sexual assault survivors. The bill does not prohibit arrests on college or university campuses. Now, you could say hypothetically, they could hide out in churches, they could hide out in private schools, they could hide out in hospitals. They can't stay there forever, and so potentially that's more to prevent them from arresting students or people who are in need of medical help and so on like that. Now, it says also, according to a State House report on SB 4, police are allowed to turn over migrant families to Border Patrol agents to avoid separating children from their parents instead of arresting them. I could say it's going to raise some real issues, though, because one of the issues you have with the illegal aliens is that when they find that there's different laws being applied if they have kids with them, they will take children and they will traffic children and use the kids as their free pass into the United States. Now, when Trump was president, they changed the laws to make it so that they would temporarily separate these children from the people they're with, and give them DNA tests to make sure the kids are actually the kids of the people they're with. Because what they were finding is that most of these kids were being trafficked. Most of these kids did not belong to the human traffickers, and there's been horrific stories, for example, of the cartels of human traffickers going to the homes of people in Mexico, kidnapping their children, and even killing kids in front of their parents if the parents refuse to hand them over to the traffickers. Now, Trump's law was meant to prevent that from happening. Democrats overturned that because he had like AOC going and crying in front of the parking lot. Remember that? Remember she like broke down crying in front of the fence? She was protesting that law that would make sure these kids are not being human trafficked. Now, that being said, there's plenty of pushback on this from the left still. They're going to be trying to challenge this. They're going to be going after Texas on this. This is one of the things they're saying. This is November 15th from the National Immigration Law Center. They say that SB 4 is the latest attempt by Texas legislators to take federal immigration law into their own hands for personal political gain through hate mongering and intimidation. Again, this is a group of challenging this, right? It says both the politics and the law behind this bill are dead wrong, they claim. Texas law enforcement officers should focus on protecting the health, welfare, and safety of all community members instead of trying to become the immigration police. This bill, will have real human consequences that all Texas residents will feel. It is an extreme bill that will endanger communities and lead to racial profiling of both immigrants and U.S.-born residents. Now, I should note some of the points on this. They argue that the federal government has the sole authority to regulate immigration policy. The issue with that, though, is that that's not the case totally. Now, the issue they have right now is that the federal government is delinquent on this responsibility. The federal government is not deporting people. The federal government is not protecting the border. The federal government is taking these illegal aliens, they're handing them off to NGOs, and they're trafficking them all throughout the United States. That is not border security. And it's causing massive costs to every single state that has to house and feed and school and provide for every single illegal alien stepping foot in their areas. Now, the other problem you have is that not all these people are illegal aliens. Some of these people are, applying for, amnesty, and they're gaming the amnesty system. And you have the international organizations like the International Organization for Migration under the United Nations schooling these people, providing them with pamphlets, teaching them how to violate American law, how to game the system. Now, that being said, what they're charging them with on this is they're changing the law in the state, and they're making it illegal for these people to enter the United States if they illegally cross the Rio Grande. And they're making that, first of all, a misdemeanor charge, and then if there's a secondary offense, if people do it more than one time, then it's a federal crime. Now, of course, in the United States, you could say, well, technically border security is on the hands of the federal government, but there's also state law. Just like you have, for example, with, abortion. Yes, there are, issues with, of course, like federal law that got overturned with Roe v. Wade getting overturned, to an extent, but states can still make their own laws on it. In the United States, states have the ability to create their own unique laws, and so even though they're probably going to challenge this, it's going to be a very interesting public debate we're going to see in the court system, not only on the federal government being its only response if you go by the historical, law of the United States, but also on the local state level ability to regulate the border, local states' ability to create laws that are separate from the federal government, and also local states dealing with the cost of illegal immigration, which even though, again, federal law, the federal government is technically responsible for it, the costs for it are falling on the states. And so all of these combined are going to make it very difficult for the federal government to challenge. The big question, though, is going to be, will the states properly enforce this? Will other states follow? And especially, will Texas actually follow through on this? Because they've been accused of not really doing that before, even though they do, pass laws on border security and so on. Now, that being said, a lot of this is not just on, Republican states and so on. On the other side of this, there are states even defying federal law using things like sanctuary status. And notably, interestingly, many leftist states are maintaining these policies despite the consequences. This is just the news. It says this: after much debate and pushback from the public, the Chicago City Council voted against asking voters to decide on the city's sanctuary status. It says a city council meeting this week included public comments from Chicago's residents seeking to end the city's migrant crisis and end their sanctuary city status. It says a proposed referendum would have given the public a chance to vote on whether or not they wanted to end or continue the policy of not enforcing federal immigration law. But, because of the vote on this, they're not giving residents that choice. Now, in Chicago, you have a very interesting problem. And you see this in a lot of these leftist states in general. The city councils, the local legislature, they're very much, I think in line with the kind of far left agenda. Oftentimes the governors and the mayors disagree with those policies, even though sometimes the governors and mayors are very far left. In Chicago, you have that situation where the governors and the mayors, they're dealing with the migrant crisis. They can't afford it, they can't handle it, but the lower level government is blocking them and opposing them with this. In New York City, you have the same problem. Mayor Eric Adams is dealing with the border crisis. The New York City can't afford it. The thing is breaking down. You have some very radical people in the lower government who are even standing against him. And even though Eric Adams is pretty far left, he's even challenging Joe Biden on it. And so you have breaks happening within the system. But it seems also, again, the stonewalling on these issues is not happening throughout the entire state. It's, breakaway groups or within the party, the Democrat Party mostly, who are breaking from the entire party with this, and it's causing rifts. And notably as well, even in many leftist states, many governors and mayors, they are actually pushing back against the border policies. Look, Katie Hobbs in Arizona, very much a Democrat. You might remember all the issues she was having over, allegations of election fraud. She's very far left technically. Katie Hobbs in Arizona, a Democrat, she signed an executive order to send the Arizona National Guard to the southern border. Here's what she said in a press release. She said, yet again, the federal government is refusing to do its job to secure our border and keep our communities safe. She's criticizing Joe Biden. Katie Hobbs continues, she says this, with this executive order, I am taking action where the federal government won't, but we can't stand alone. Arizona needs resources and manpower to reopen the Lukeville crossing, manage the flow of migrants, and maintain a secure, orderly, and humane border. Despite continued requests for assistance, it says, or she says, the Biden administration has refused to deliver desperately needed resources to Arizona's border. Are you getting that, folks? Now look, if Texas begins enforcing border laws, if Texas makes it a crime to send people back and charge them with crimes, what's going to happen? The illegal immigrants are going to change their port of entry. They're going to start going to Arizona, they're going to start going to California, and these states that have been, criticizing Texas, because Texas has some of the easiest areas to pass on to cross illegally into the U.S., it's going to shift all that traffic, all that human trafficking, all that human flow to these very Democrat states that are already trying to bill the federal government. They're already criticizing the federal government, even though technically the governors and the mayors are in the same party as Joe Biden. It's going to cause a lot more issues, and as the problem becomes worse for them, they're going to have to look and see whether they choose to adopt the same policy as Texas, where they begin enforcing border laws where the federal government were not. Now, the rest of the episode will be talking about different methods that are being used to attempt to regulate guns. We'll be talking about all that and more, and as well as the live Q&A only on Epoch TV. So if you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, come join us on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. I'll also be releasing an exclusive interview from Turning Point's America Fest, where I'm at right now, including with Patrick Bet-David, Dr. Gad Saad, and others. So look forward to all of that only on Epoch TV. The link to that is in the description of the video, and I will see you there.